politicians, who are both Muslim, plan to visit Israel and the occupied Palestinian territories this coming weekend. But Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu says the visit would harm Israel. Earlier, U.S. President Donald Trump said Israel would show great weakness if the visit was allowed to go ahead. Let's bring in Harry Fawcett. He's joining us from West Jerusalem. And it's believed that pressure from Trump could have led the Israeli government to taking this decision. Harry, what more do we know?
Well, that certainly seems the case, given the chronology of how all of this has played out. This was in the very final stages of preparation, this visit. We had heard that the two congresswomen would be visiting Hebron, Bethlehem, Ramallah, and East Jerusalem. There was reporting this week that the Israeli authorities were working out how to handle a potential visit to the Al-Aqsa Mosque compound, known as the Temple Mount, to Jews. But then we had this apparent reversal, reports of which came through this morning, and then in the last few minutes we've had confirmation from Benjamin Netanyahu himself saying that the sole purpose of this visit was to strengthen the boycott and delegitimize Israel, the fact that they weren't planning to meet any Israeli officials or opposition members, although it must be said there were no indications they were going to meet PA officials either, and saying that this would harm Israel and incite against it. Now, as you say, the key difference, I think, seems to be the attitude of the White House and Donald Trump in particular. There was reporting earlier this week that he had said that if they were going to boycott Israel, then Israel should boycott them. And then just before the Israeli official announcement came this tweet from Donald Trump saying it would show great weakness for Israel to allow them in, and saying that they hate Israel and all Jewish people, which is extraordinary language against two US congresswomen. And really, it does seem that Benjamin Netanyahu is doing this because of this pressure. You have to remember that his own ambassador to the United States, Ron Dermer, just last month said that this visit would go ahead. There was a bilateral visit by US representatives just over the weekend, dozens of them, at which both the House minority and majority leaders, Republican and Democrat, advocated for this visit to go ahead. We've had a response from Hanan Ashrawi, the veteran PLO figure who was part of the preparations, the planning of this visit. She said that it's an outrageous act of hostility against the American people and their representatives, saying that Israel is trying to obscure its human rights violations. There's also criticism from pro-Israeli voices saying that this will damage the bipartisan nature of the US-Israeli relationship going forward. Elizabeth Warren, the US presidential candidate, said that if this was the case, that it would be a shameful and unprecedented act.
OK, Harry Fawcett with an update from West Jerusalem. Thank you. Let's speak to Dan Arbel. He's a scholar in residence at the Center for Israeli Studies at the American University. He's joining us via Skype from Rockville. That's in the U.S. State of Maryland. Dan Arbel, thanks for being with us on Al Jazeera. How do you explain a U.S. president recommending to another country to block entry to two U.S. citizens, let alone two U.S. members of Congress?
I see it mostly as a dangerous intersection between American politics and Israeli politics. And I think that Mr. Netanyahu's decision to bar the entry of Representatives Omar and Tlaib is just to cater Trump's policies and anti-Democrats' line. And so this is very dangerous, in which Israel enters itself, inserts itself into the political game in the United States, which is very unhelpful. And as your correspondent has said, it undermines the long-standing bipartisan relationship between support of the United States and Israel, as Israel is becoming a political football between Republicans and Democrats.
Yeah, so how does Netanyahu play that game then? How does he balance Israeli ties with the Democrats against his close alliance with the Trump administration and Trump himself?
He has a very big problem now, and is creating an even deeper problem with the Democratic Party and its constituents here in the United States.
I mean, would you say that this is really a rare move by Netanyahu and the Israeli government? Because as we know, Israel many times and often hosts U.S. delegations, including senators and representatives.
That's correct. And Israel, is despite the fact that Representatives Omar and Tlaib are not lovers of Israel and they're very harsh critics, with some statements aligning themselves with the BDS movement, the boycott of Israel movement, and with Omar comments which are on the borderline of anti-Semitic, still, Israel, I think, is strong enough and mature enough to deal with critics and allow them to enter and show them the country and have a dialogue with them rather than not let them in. I think
but is it really because the prime minister, is it really though because the prime minister has said that Israel is open to, quote, all criticism, but not calls for boycotts which harm the state? So it doesn't sound like Israel is ready to have any sort of constructive dialogue with anyone that it believes criticizes the state.
So this is a contradiction. The act right now, which they seem to be taking, and what the prime minister has stated in the past, clearly there's a contradiction there, and it's very unfortunate that the prime minister has had to make this move and take such a decision, which I believe will have grave consequences for U.S.-Israel relations for years to come.
All right. We thank you very much for speaking to us. Dan Arbel.